honor to speak with you today. It's actually a privilege to introduce a friend and a speaker who you will thoroughly enjoy and learn from. As a Jewish person, I'm not unfamiliar with conspiracy theory or being the target of same. As a person who immigrated to Utah almost 40 years ago, I'm also familiar with the concept of being a stranger in a strange land. A land that I've come to appreciate, try to understand, and love. And our speaker today, I think, could fit that definition as well. He's not only arrived in this land, but he's helped to explain and illuminate it, not just to us, but to others around the world. Bob is an extraordinary historian and a teacher. And I'd like to share with you just a little bit of history that makes the point I'm trying to make about what happens when you introduce a knowledgeable stranger into a strange land. It is the case that for many years, Jews were not privileged to own land at all. And near the end of the 19th century, many Jewish reformers and Zionist nationalists argued that Jews needed to become a normal nation and urged the abandonment of urban living and occupations traditionally associated with them. This back to the land movement urged Jews to find a purer life and to renounce sedentary jobs in favor of those based on manual labor. Representatives of one of their organizations traveled in 1911 to investigate potential sites for this living on the land in the West. While traveling, they received a telegram suggesting that they stop in Utah. Our state was at that time engaged in a campaign to attract settlers and in the process of constructing the Paiute Canal, which was to irrigate vast tracts of desert. That association was also encouraged by the Jewish community of Salt Lake City that included Simon Bamberger, Samuel Newhouse, and attorney Daniel Alexander, who pledged their support and began to advocate for the group with area business and political leaders, much as we do in Rotary. The Utah State Board of Land Commissioners sent a representative to escort the group to inspect available land, and they were favorably impressed with a parcel in south central Utah below the planned canal. Convinced of the soil's fertility and the state's assurance of available water, they agreed to purchase the land at auction on August 7th, 1911. By May of 1912, the colonists began to see their investment pay off, as they were able to harvest their crops while new families frequently arrived at the site. But the colonists were simultaneously plagued by dust storms, heat, strong winds, flies, and mosquitoes, which when combined with a scarcity of water, doomed their harvest. 600 acres produced only half of their expected yield. By 1915, the population of this community called Clarion had decreased by almost 2/3, and a second consecutive poor harvest led to even more residents leaving. Ultimately, a state order terminated the colony's title on November 25th of 1915, and in January, Utah began to auction off the colony's land. Virtually all evidence of this aspirational utopian community had disappeared. While hiking in Utah, Bob came upon the remnants of that community. He subsequently had an interview with a family in Los Angeles, which were descendants of one of the Clarion's family. As a result of that, he tracked down 53 families with ties to Clarion and reconstructed the story of that community from interviews and records. If you'd like to know more, you read Professor Goldberg's book, Back to the Soil, The Jewish Farmers of Clarion, Utah, and Their Work. As a teacher, Bob is a professor of history and the director of the Tanner Humanities Center at the University of Utah. In addition to the books that I mentioned, he's the author of 7 other books. One of them, Barry Goldwater and Enemies Within, and the second one, The Culture of Conspiracy in Modern America, were published by Yale University Press. Forthcoming from our press, the University of Utah, is an edited work called Faith and Reason, Conscience and Conflict, The Paths of Lowell Bennion, Sterling McMurrin, and Obert C. Tanner. So I think you can appreciate that Bob has credibility as a stranger to our land who has helped to explain it to us and to others. He's won 12 teaching honors, including the Presidential Teaching Scholar Award and University of Utah Distinguished Teaching Award. And in 2003, he held the Fulbright Distinguished Chair in American Studies at the Swedish Institute for North American Studies at Uppsala University. He was awarded the Rosenblatt Prize for Excellence in 2008. His wife is a clinical social worker, and they have 4 sons and 4 grandchildren. It is indeed an honor to share with you my good friend and well-respected colleague, Dr. Robert Goldberg.
Give me a second. We'll see if that works. I might need help. I do need help. I'm kindly accepted. I understand I have to shoehorn my talk a bit, so I'm going to be watching my watch very carefully. Jay, thank you so much for those very kind words, and thank you for that introduction. And thank you all for allowing me to have an opportunity to share my research. Before I begin, I just wanted to say hello to a few very friendly friends and faces. It's good to see Bob and Chris, Cause, Mike, and Pete. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope the expectations are not too crushing for me at this point. I want to share my research about conspiracy theories and conspiracy thinkers. I argue in my book that we live at a time in American history when conspiracy theories and conspiracy thinking permeates our culture, our language, our very interpretation of current events. Understandably, many people look to the tragic events of 9/11 in explanation. Conspiracy thinking obsesses us. Conspiracy thinking occupies us because of the very real attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and in the wake of repeated acts of violence and terrorism. 9/11 was a conspiracy. At least 19 men, probably many more, were involved. And we also know that more recent attacks in Paris and Brussels also indicate the existence of a terrorist conspiratorial network, a global network. Yet, conspiracy thinking is not a recent phenomenon in American history, nor is it confined to specific events or specific perpetrators, nor will it dissolve as the pain of these events eases. Rather, I'm going to argue that conspiracy theories and conspiracy thinking is a persistent, central, and traditional theme in American history. Let's begin. How do we recognize a conspiracy theory? Here is the general scenario. Hidden groups, intelligent, diabolical, and cunning, shape and move history. Revolution, civil war, depression, recession, climate change are their means. Wealth and power are their ends. Nothing is random or a matter of coincidence. No credence is given to chance, human error, miscalculation. Conspiracy theories are ruthless in their logic. Anyone, as a conspiracy theorist told me, can connect the dots. Conspiracy theorists think magically. Plotters have complete forethought. Plotters operate without restraint. The accused, the real perpetrators, the Japanese at Pearl Harbor, Oswald in Dallas, the Muslims during 9/11, are really pawns, patsies, puppets, fall guys. Conspiracy theories read like detective stories, adventure stories. And that kind of writing, as we know, disguises slips in logic. We see them mistaking the facts for innuendo and hearsay and rumor. Note that conspiracy theories are not unique to the United States. Long before the settlement of America, conspiracy theories in Europe peppered history. Catholic plots, Jewish plots, Protestant plots. If we look for the most dangerous conspiratorial times, it would be Hitler's Germany, it would be Stalin's Soviet Union. And if we look today at the most conspiratorial places on the globe, we have to look to the Middle East, because their conspiracy theories color the news. They inform government policy, and they attract large numbers of believers. If not unique to the United States, conspiracy theories have developed particular traits as they've adapted to the American environment. There are conspiracy theories that are American in tone, in style, and in shape. What energizes conspiracy theories? What powers conspiracy theories here? I argue that basic American ideas, values, and beliefs are the power and the energizers. I want to outline three basic American ideas that are important in understanding conspiracy theories. The first is Americans' sense of mission, what has been called American exceptionalism. That is, Americans have a special role to play on the stage of world history. In the colonial period, in our colonial period, the Puritans came to New England, believing that they were going to raise up a city upon the hill. They had been sent by God on an errand into the wilderness, that they would raise up a new world, strongly in belief in the divine mission. In the 19th century, Americans believed in manifest destiny, that God's hand was upon our shoulder, pushing us across the continent to raise up a continental showcase from sea to shining sea to God's glory. And in the 20th and 21st centuries, we are pressed by a special mission to spread, to safeguard liberty, democracy, freedom, and human rights around the world. We see ourselves as the agents of civilization. How else do we understand World War I and World War II and Korea and Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan and the current war against ISIS? The war against, as one president told us, the axis of evil, against the evildoers. But as we all know, doing God's work, doing the work of civilization, awakens the enemies of the divine plan, awakens those who seek to conspire against God's plan. A second value, a second idea, and that is American diversity. Our strength as an amalgam of people. Yet for the suspicious, for the watchful, diversity is a curse. The enemies are now within the gate. The enemies, subject to different gods and lords and doctrines, are here, disloyal and dangerous. You know, I'm reminded of a word that rolls off Americans' lips, and that word is un-American, which means divided loyalties. You know, you can't be un-Israeli or un-Swedish, but it's very easy to be un-American. There's a third idea I want to play with. Nurtured in the colonial period and building with the growing authority in the 20th and 21st centuries of the federal government, has come a fear and a concern about the concentration of power in centralized hands. Now, there are only three Englishmen that Americans can quote by heart: William Shakespeare, John Lennon, and Lord Acton. Said Lord Acton, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." We Americans know by instinct when power is given to the ministers of government, they grow greedy for more power and more control and more authority. And over time, those tendencies nibble away at our freedoms, the freedoms of the people, such that the end goal is to forge chains and shackles upon the people. If you worry about conspiracy in America, look at the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, the document Tom Jefferson wrote. And there you will see a reference to the conspiracy against the American colonies by the British government. If the Constitution is a heavenly banner, it is filled with these kinds of anxieties. A written Bill of Rights to protect the rights of the people against usurping authorities. a checks and balance mechanism within our government to control the greedy. The message is American liberty depends on vigilance. American liberty depends on watchfulness. American liberty depends actually on suspiciousness. This warning has been sounded for generations. It was sounded by Tom Paine and Tom Jefferson. It was sounded by Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan. And it is sounded by every Republican running for president in 2016. The message is clear. Citizens must be alert. Citizens must be constantly vigilant, or their liberty will vanish. Isn't that what energizes the defense of the Second Amendment in our lifetime? Thus, mission, fear of diversity, and a fear of central authority has provided fertile ground to raise up constant crops of conspiracy theories in America. Now note, empowering conspiracy theorists is the fact that history occasionally coughs up a real conspiracy. Julius Caesar was killed in a conspiracy. The Tea Party of 1773 was a conspiracy. John Brown's raid before the Civil War was a conspiracy. So too was Lincoln's assassination. The Reichstag fire in Germany in 1933 was a conspiracy. And the Watergate break-in and cover-up was also a conspiracy. Often cited as proof by the conspiracy theorists that the enemies are lurking nearby. Note the long list of people who have been targeted as conspirators in American history. Native Americans, Salem witches, British ministers, Catholics, Mormons, Jews, slaves and slaveholders, Masons, Wall Street bankers, Bolsheviks, Japanese Americans, all in the turn and among many other plotters have been cursed and cast in the plotter's role. Why are these conspiracy theories so acceptable? Who sells them? The usual focus is on the conspiracy theorists. I've had conversations and I've interviewed conspiracy theorists. They are not sick, nor are they delusional. Rather, they are very successful entrepreneurs and business people. They know how to sell a product, a book, a tape, a movie, a script. They have persuasive rhetorical skills. They know how to write and they know how to direct. They know how to get market shares. They play to American traditions. They play to power struggles in America. But they are only part of the answer, because there are two other teachers who instruct us, who mentor us in believing in conspiracies. The second, after the conspiracy theorists, is the American media. Television, film, and talk radio. Television, talk radio, and film entertain us with conspiracy theories. They feed our appetite and they feed our fears. From the very first blockbuster movie in American history, Birth of a Nation in 1915, to Mr. Smith Goes to Washington in the 1930s, to more recent movies, The Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Da Vinci Code, State of Play, Arlington Road, Ghost Rider, Jurassic World, and more recently, Star Wars, 10 Cloverfield Lane, and the new release, Money Monster. You can learn and hear about conspiracy theories. The image is there. Or watch television. Person of Interest, Justified, Homeland, Fringe, Expanse, and runs and reruns of X-Files. And the docudramas on the A&E channel, the Discovery Channel, even the Travel Channel talks about conspiracies. We have been fed a steady diet. The images are powerful among us. And we are convinced that conspiracies exist, conspiracies are common, conspiracies have power, conspiracies are a threat, and that conspiracists have infiltrated the government. The final actor, the final teacher, and that is the federal government. The federal government raises suspicion and instills us to believe in conspiracies in two ways. The first is American presidents and American leaders have constantly mobilized citizens in this country by playing the conspiracy card. Against Mormons in the 19th century, against German Americans in World War I, against trade unionists in World War I, against Japanese Americans in 1941 and 42, against Black student and anti-war activists in the 1960s. Some of you might remember the vast right-wing conspiracy of the 1990s. The evildoers today. What our presidents have done, what our leaders do, is they divide the world between good and evil, right and wrong, black and white, patriot and traitor. When they do this, they are following the conspiracist script. There's a second way that Washington has cultivated a strong public perception of conspiracy, and that is through the abuse and arrogance of power. There is a sense in America, the federal government has betrayed us and committed its own form of treason. Many believe that the government has taken us down a trail of broken promises, deception, and lies. Lies and broken promises that have eroded faith and trust in this country's institutions. The signposts are well known, and they're well known to everyone in this room. The Warren Commission report following the death of John F. Kennedy. Operation Blue Book in regard to dismissing the threat of flying saucers. The counterintelligence programs of the 1950s and 1960s. Vietnam, Watergate, the Iran-Contra scandal, and even the failure to find weapons of mass destruction in regard to the Iraqi war. All of these play and deepen distrust of central authority, as we said earlier, a key theme in American history. I watch a gauge that comes out every year since 1958. In 1958, the Gallup organization did a poll of Americans. And the Gallup organization in 1958 asked the question, do you trust the government to do what is right all or most of the time? And this question has been asked over and over again until this very year. In 1958, 3/4 of Americans said, I trust the government to do what is right all or most of the time. By 1980, the number had declined. 1 in 4 Americans, 25%, trusted the government to do what is right all or most of the time. Today, 13% of Americans trust the government to do what is right. 1 in 10 Americans say they trust the government never to do what is right. But this problem of trust and this problem of faith is not confined to the president and the executive branch of the United States government. There has been an erosion of trust and faith in Congress, in the courts, in the churches, in the universities, in the labor unions, and in the corporations. The basic institutions of our community and of our society. And our role models in learning that trust and loss of trust, the media, federal government, and conspiracy theorists. Now, how does technology play into all of this? When I mean technology, I'm talking about the internet. The internet makes it easier to access conspiracy theories. It makes it easier to circulate conspiracy theories. And it has created a global network of conspiracy theorists and thinkers. Enter what's called the echo chamber. Conspiracy in the echo chamber replaces history. Conspiracy explains current events. In blogs, in chat rooms, through social media, the initiated self-segregate themselves. They seek not information, but confirmation of their beliefs. And in this echo chamber, they only find the like-minded, They don't find dissonance. They don't find dissenters. They find only people who agree. Researchers have found that men and women who are reinforced in their beliefs become more determined in their beliefs. They become more extreme in their beliefs and less likely to change their beliefs. Why is conspiracy conditioning so hard to break? Conspiracy thinking is psychologically soothing. It orders the random. It gives clarity to ambiguity. It finds purpose in tragedy. It assigns responsibility. The conspiracy theorists will tell you who did it, how they did it, who they collaborated with, and why they did it. This kind of knowledge enfranchises the powerless. It's an antidote to powerlessness. It gives you a sense of meaning and reason in the face of these problems in America. And they're believable because they give names, dates, places, data, details, facts. And as we all know, the devil is always in the details. The messengers also enthrall us. Ministers, newscasters, presidential candidates, college professors, who come to us as the people's champions, latter-day Paul Revere's, who are writing to give us the warning, to tell us the truth despite the fear of life and limb. And finally, through repetition, over and over and over again, on the internet or not, we learn of the conspiracy theorists. And if repeated over and over again, it just has to be true. Some dismiss conspiracy theorists and conspiracy theories as harmless, the work of the sick and the uninformed. I take conspiracy thinking seriously because conspiracy theories destroy trust and faith, trust in public officials and faith in America's institutions. And when you lose trust and faith in the basic institutions, negotiations and compromise become impossible. Because opponents are not simply wrong. Opponents do not simply disagree. Opponents have become traitors who have betrayed the country and its faith. In this atmosphere, we open ourselves to the rants of demagogues and liars. In this atmosphere, civil discourse and dialogue become impossible. And we live in a situation where 60% of Americans still believe John Kennedy was killed in a conspiracy. A third of Americans still believe that the Roswell incident, where aliens supposedly landed in 1947, was covered up by the government, and aliens are living on American Army bases. And still, despite a variety of information released by the president, 1/3 of Americans still believe that Barack Obama is not a citizen of the United States. We have in this country moved beyond healthy skepticism. We are eager to imagine the worst. We're eager to entertain our wildest fears. And be prepared this summer when the supporters of Donald Trump might be disappointed, and the supporters of Bernie Sanders will be disappointed. We're not only going to see an erosion of faith in America's institutions and political parties, but you will also hear the cry of conspiracy. In fact, we're already hearing about the rigged election system and the rigged parties. That, my friends, speaks of conspiracy. Perhaps it's now time to recognize the danger that conspiracy theories pose. Perhaps it's time to end our denial, to quit dismissing conspiracy theories as foolish or as harmless. I argue, in conclusion, that confrontation and refutation are the most valuable strategies we can pursue, the only way to defeat this new enemy within. Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Could it be that we might be hardwired towards that disposition based on the fact that we are unable today to find a way to make change, and therefore it becomes a defense mechanism to accept that there's a conspiracy?
There's a recent book, which I have not yet just read the reviews, called Suspicious Mind, which argues that the brain is hardwired to accept the idea of conspiracy theories. I think there's something to that. I'd like to see more research on the power of the brain in regard to these. But what is important to me is the social dynamic in regard to this. Why certain theories are more believable than other theories, how these theories spread, why they're so powerful. So I think there's a combination of the two.
What are some of the psychological characteristics of conspiracy theorists?
That's a great question. There was a movie with Mel Gibson called Conspiracy Theory. I'm sure some of you have seen it. And this movie paints the conspiracy theorist as we expect the conspiracy theorist to be. That is, very jittery, hands moving around, eyes darting back and forth, 10 locks on the doors. Okay? The nuts among us. Okay? Let me note, in the plot of Conspiracy Theory, which was this motion picture with Julia Roberts as well, although Mel Gibson was quite upset and had PTSD, the conspiracy theory was accurate, according to the movie. But what I have found, and what other researchers have found, is there's nothing particularly different between conspiracy theorists and non-conspiracy theorists. I gave you a number of 60% of people believe that John Kennedy was killed in an assassination. At one point in the 1970s, it was 80%. Now, when's the last time 80% of Americans believed in anything together? 58% of Republicans, before the release of Obama's birth certificate, believed he had been born in Kenya. Okay? 58%. That's not a minority opinion. The one thing that conspiracy theorist researchers have argued is what trait people have who believe in conspiracies is this loss of trust and loss of faith. And they are susceptible to a variety of conspiracy theories as a result.
How would you suggest, if you're engaged in a conversation with a conspiracy theorist, that you hold the conversation without creating an enemy?
Yeah, the question was, when you're dealing with a conspiracy theorist, how do you maintain a conversation or relationship without creating an enemy? You know, that's a great question. I'm not sure I can answer that. I have interviewed conspiracy theorists from the John Birch Society to those who believed in the alien landing in Roswell to people who believe that Barack Obama is a Kenyan. And I usually start the conversation, or usually in the middle of the conversation after they've spoken for quite a while, say, what evidence would I have to present to you to convince you that you're wrong? Okay? And I said this to one of the Kennedy assassination conspiracy theorists. And his comment was, there's no information you could present. Because in the 1990s, the Clinton administration released all the information that the government had secreted during these 30 years after the Kennedy assassination. They had re-interviewed the doctors at Parkland Hospital to get a clearer record. They did an enormous amount of research and released all this material. And so when I mentioned this to the conspiracy theorist, his response was, they fooled you too, Bob. There's still one file, 3 drawers, that they're not releasing. And that has the names. So you get to a point where it is a waste of breath. But you've also got to understand the people who believe in conspiracy theories. There are those who who weave the events into plots, who are in this inner circle, who you will not shake. And part of the reason you will not shake them is their bread and butter comes from selling conspiracy theories. But then there are outer rings of people who may have seen a tape, may have seen a film, may have read a book, to other people who have heard that Judge Scalia was assassinated by Barack Obama. Okay? Those people, you have a better, those people, I'm looking over my shoulder, those people, you have a better sense of being able to discuss things with.
Thank you, Dr. Goldberg.